Hello, everybody. This is lesson number 78. Hit them where they ain't. This is an old saying. I think it was attributed to Dizzy Dean in baseball. He just would hit the ball where the people weren't. Or maybe I have that story wrong, but it's been, it applies to almost everything. You have to have a weapon that kills your opponent. You have to hit the ball where they're not. You cannot, it doesn't matter if you make the greatest hit or the greatest pass and it's right into your opponent's defense. It doesn't matter if you have the best double leg in the Olympics and a guy's really great at stopping the double leg. It doesn't matter if you've got a fabulous jab and that's not what your opponent works on. You have to actually hit them where they ain't. It's kind of a joke and it's a cliche, but like most cliches, there's a lot of wisdom in it, a lot of truth in it. I mean, things don't become cliches without there being a lot of truth behind them. It's funny, people say, oh, that's a cliche. I'm like, yeah, it's so true. So often people repeat it a whole lot. Yeah, that's a cliche, which means it must be pretty good most of the time. And this happens. This is why one can beat two and two can beat three and three can beat one, because they have a different vulnerability to where they are. When the heel hook first came out and nobody knew what it was, it devastated fighters, but then people learned to defend against it. The triangle choke, Dan Severn got caught in that. He'd never seen one before. Let him practice it for a little bit, he won't. You got to have a weapon. You have to have a weapon that your opponents will be vulnerable to. Hit where they're at. Militaries, you can study military, but the old World War II started out to be fought like World War I in trench warfare, and it was just the German blitzkrieg just destroyed armies. The French had a more modern army, more modern tanks, better equipped in a lot of ways, and they fell in a couple weeks. British had radar, the Germans didn't. These things where you have to know where your opponent's thumb screws are. You have to know where your opponent is vulnerable. You have to know where your opponent ain't. You have to hit them where they ain't. Which means you have to hit them where they're vulnerable. Interesting story. Muhammad Ali often said to be the greatest fighter of all time. Well, he had 3 fights with Joe Frazier, and all 3 of them could have gone either way. Joe Frazier was basically even with him. He had 3 fights with Kenny Norton. Kenny Norton was basically even with him. Kenny Norton and Joe Frazier fought George Foreman and got destroyed. Joe Frazier and Kenny Norton both have beaten Ali, but then Ali destroyed Foreman, and Foreman destroyed Kenny Norton and Joe Frazier. Each was vulnerable in a different way. It's like rock, paper, scissors. It doesn't matter if you play rock every time and your opponent plays paper, you lose. You have to hit them where they ain't. You have to have an attack that works, whether it's, I said it could be anything. It could be a stealth fighter, it could be a submarine, it could be an aircraft carrier. The battleship the Bismarck got knocked out by a I think a swordfish airplane that was kind of new. It just hit the rudder, caused it not to be able to turn very well. You have to have, so when you're going through strategy in life and you're going up against a business deal, an opponent on a wrestling match, baseball field, whatever, or whatever it happens to be, you have to have an effective attack, an effective method of delivering your weapons, your whatever. It could be your study skills. It doesn't matter. You can do Cornell notes, and if you have them set up where you can find what they are and work them well. Could be anything. A race car, a race car that can't stop in the turn, that has a 700 horsepower engine, is going to be beat by a 200 horsepower engine car that can stay on the track better. So hit them where they ain't means when you are going into whatever, combat, a debate, you're going on a high school debate and your opponent's going to say something, you better have something that's going to win against that particular opponent. And it's a fine line. There's a thing called sticking to your plan and be doing what you do well. That's valuable. But there's also doing what you do well effectively against that particular opponent. Joe Frazier did what he did well, very well, made him the champion of the earth, beat a lot of good men, and it didn't work against George Foreman. You know, Ali did some things that worked well for him, but it didn't work, and didn't really work that great against Joe Frazier. You know, he was with him all three of those fights. He was not, you know, he was not out of any of those fights. Very even. So it matters, and I use that to illustrate because I don't want to people are getting all emotional and unthinking about what a boxing thing, whether they're fanboys of one particular person or the other, just looking at the logic of it. You have to hit your opponent where they're not. You have to hit your opponent where they're vulnerable. It doesn't, you know, the Mongol army is a perfect example. They were mobile and could have spears. I often wondered what would happen if they took on a Roman legion who would have shields and, you know, could defend against that, or maybe not. I don't know. Or took on an ancient battle that had a bunch of slings, a wonderful slinger, peltis, I think they were called. So you need to hit them where they ain't. When you're dealing with life, you're dealing with other people, you're dealing with organizations, there's certain things that work and certain things that don't work, and that's what you need to be aware of. Simple thing, lesson 78, hit them where they ain't, hope it helps somebody. Bye.